Hi folks, it's Pastor Dave here with your Thursday Thoughts segment where we say goodbye to the gospel of the week before and look ahead to the gospel to come. Now, last Sunday was the first Sunday in Lent, and we talked about the temptation in the wilderness, which introduces the character of Satan to the gospel stories. And we said during this sermon that we as a church and as people of faith tend to mischaracterize and misuse Satan. We want to think about that a little harder today. We tend to want to elevate Satan to be an evil character equal to and the opposite of God. And we do that for a couple reasons. First of all, because it fits our sense of narrative nicely. Every story that you've ever heard or seen in a movie has a good guy and a bad guy, and you can tell the difference between them super easily. And in order to be a credible threat and make a good story, the bad guy's got to be almost but not quite as good as the good guy. It's got to be a real perceived threat. There would be no story and there would be no movie if the movie started out and said, well, the good guy won, and now we're all happy. That's it. What would you do for the other 600 pages or the other 1 hour, 59 minutes of the movie? It wouldn't exist. So instead of that, instead of altering our storytelling, we take the biblical story and fit it into what we think is the right narrative. The problem is, it's not what Scripture says. At no point in Scripture, give or take for 10 seconds in the book of Job, but really even then Satan doesn't prevail, at no point does Satan win in any of these stories. At no point does Satan really provide a credible threat to God, God's kingdom, God's reign, or God's love in any of these stories. Every time God and Satan meet, Satan becomes powerless and all but disappears from the narrative as God prevails. There's not even that much of a battle. I mean, we expect to gather in the streets and root for one side or the other. There's no show to be had. God prevails. That's it. And when we elevate Satan to the level of God and try to create a conflict, we are actually unwinning the battle that God won long ago. We are actually looking at God and saying, no, we don't want you to do that. We don't want this to be over. Instead, we want there to be a fight. And when we do that, we need to ask ourselves the question, whose side are we really on? We say we're doing this in the name of God, but it sounds an awful lot like we're elevating the other side and saying to God, we don't care what you did, we want it our way. And that is the second sneaky reason that we do that. Because if there's still a battle to be fought, and if the outcome is still undecided, that we get to pick a side and we feel like our choice really matters. Oh, I chose better. I chose to believe right. I chose to be on the right side, and who knows? It might be me that makes the difference. Maybe I'm finally the one that tips the scales and wins this thing for the good team. Except again, what if the battle was already won? What if the scoreboard already said 0.00? That's exactly what happened in the wilderness temptation. Jesus walked out of it unscathed. That's what happened for all of us on the cross, when Jesus defeated the power of death and rose to new life as the first fruits for all of us, so we would rise too. At that moment, this was done. But we don't like that, because then it appears to happen with someone else besides us at the center. And we don't want anybody at the center besides us, even if that person is God. And so we say, no, wait a minute. There's got to be overtime. There's got to be something. There's got to be one more play, and I'm going to be in it, and my choice or my beliefs is going to be the absolute Hail Mary pass that wins this thing. In doing so, we again deny what God has done in order for us to put ourselves in the middle. Whose side are we on? Turns out it's not so easy to tell the good guys from the bad guys, because meaning to be one, we instead become the other. And it happens exactly when we try to tell the story the way we think it should be instead of the way it actually went. And it happens exactly when we talk about this character, this person of Satan. Last thing, rewind back in your head. The awful churches you've been to, the awful sermons that you've heard that create divisions, that are holier than thou, that are all about the pastor who's up there speaking over and against the congregation, over and against everybody else in the whole world, believers versus non-believers, all that garbage. Think about that in your mind. How did those preachers use Satan? It's like a boogeyman who's coming to get you, right? It's like this dark, awesome power that you might fall prey to if you make the wrong decision. And you better choose the good power instead of the bad one, which happens to look just like the preacher says it does. And you're supposed to act just like him if you want to be saved. Because if that preacher tells you that God already won this battle for you, and you are already loved even when you make the wrong choices, then that preacher doesn't have any power to get you to do what he wants. Whose side is that preacher on? I will tell you right now, it is not God's. Read the story again. Read the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ. And you are going to find in Satan not a powerful adversary, but an impotent arguer, a devil's advocate who has no case because the trial has been overturned. And that is the end of the story. If you're going to talk about him, talk about how God's love is the center of everything. And there is no room for anyone, be it a person with horns and pitchfork, or a person with a clerical collar, or anyone else, to say different. That's it for this Thursday Thoughts. We're going to go to Mark chapter 8 and Peter's confession that Jesus was the Messiah on next Sunday. We will see you there for that.